Meeting of the Finance Subcommittee after adjourning yesterday on the 10th of December. Thank you all very much for coming. As a reminder, this meeting is being webcast and we've got all the officers behind us on the dais facilitating that. And just to remind members and officers, please do make sure to speak clearly into the microphone so that what you say can easily be picked up on the webcast. Just to remind members and officers and members of the public of the emergency evacuation procedure. We are not expecting a fire alarm today, and if one does occur, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area, out the main exit, turn right down the ramp and go towards the cathedral where we will assemble. Before we kick off, I realised yesterday that I forgot to thank the officers who've been involved with facilitating the Finance Subcommittee over the last year, so I would like to pay thanks to Ian and the rest of the Democratic Services team, Andy and Sarah, who unfortunately can't be with us today, and the rest of the finance team for making all the work we do possible. So thank you very much to all of you for that. Agenda item 2 is public forum. This is a two-part meeting. We've allocated public forum for the start of each part of the meeting. I think, given that we've got one member of the public in attendance, I will skip a lot of the preamble instead of repeating it from yesterday. I understand that David Redgewell couldn't be with us today, so we've got Brendan in his place to ask his questions and deliver his statement. So, Brendan, whenever you're ready, please do feel free. Oh, and excuse me, those are on the Transport and Connectivity Committee.
Thank you, everyone. I think the first thing we need to do is, as they would say, is look at what budget we have got for the next financial year and look at how it can be spent. There's a lot of graffiti bus shelters in the city centre around the suburban area. So what's your budget for that is my first question on behalf of Dave. The second question is what is your budget on Metro West services and bus services? And the third question is, what is the budget on infrastructure? What are we doing to improve infrastructure? Are we adding more cattle curbs? Are we adding more bus eye points? There's a lot of bus eye points in the city centre, like the Haymarket, that are not currently working, and disabled people need to be able to read them so they know when the buses are coming, or public transport, because not everyone has access to the internet. We also need clarification of what part of the funding is going to go into what part of the sector. For example, how much we are going to have for bus shelters, how much we are going to have to improve services. Because although this money is a great welcome to us, it's not as much as 2021. And me and Dave are worried that if we will not have enough money to support all the infrastructures. Thank you very much. And the bus services. We also need more night buses for next year. Friday and Saturdays are not good enough. I was in consultation with Rob Kin, the Assistant Managing Director of First West of England. The last number 3 the other night got cancelled at 11:10 at night. And for a city like Bristol, 11:10 is not that late. I was left stranded until 1:30 in the morning, where I then had to get the staff bus to come and pick me up. So more funding is required to run later bus services on a weekday. Maybe not through the night, but all bus services should at least run till 1 in the morning.
Thank you very much indeed, Brendan. And I'm very sorry that you ended up stranded. That's not an acceptable situation, and I'm sorry that did happen to you. We have made a note, I think, of the supplementary questions you raised, and unless any of the officers would like to respond now, I think we can get you some written responses to those. Thank you. I'm seeing a hand from John Smith, so he might want to come in on some of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Thanks for coming to the meeting, and thanks for raising questions. We will respond properly in writing, but I'm happy to try and answer the questions that you put out there. So in terms of the bus services, as I think you know, that the primary responsibility for that is with the West of England Combined Authority. However, we contribute towards a transport levy.
Yeah, that's fine. We need to know the funding and stuff.
No, absolutely. Sorry, Brendan.
There needs to be decent funding put in place, because if we don't act now, then 2026 could see more problems occur.
No, absolutely. So the council for this current financial year contributes 10.23 million. We've talked to David before, as I'm sure you've seen, about what the amount is going to be next year. We're in active discussion with the Combined Authority and the other unitary authorities about that. There was some specific questions about bus stop funding as well. The written answer contains an answer to that, Brendan, but we'll follow up with your supplementals in writing as well.
Responsible for bus stop infrastructure and where buses stop in the centre, and specifically outside Electricity House on the centre C9, too many buses are stopping there. You've got all the North Somerset services and all the services to Emerson's Green and Fishpond, and buses can't get on the stop. And we'll tell users are left stranded. It's the same with the Haymarket going towards Clifton. When the 5 and the 77 and the 8 are on the stand, the 9 can't get in. So bus stops need to be moved, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at by the council.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed, Brendan, for those supplementaries. David Redwell also had a statement in. Do you wish to give a statement as well, in addition to what you were saying there?
To make sure that the eye points don't get moved. The eye points are very important. They need to stay in. So at Western Interchange and the Metro Bar, and the eye points are working. And we also need to make sure that on Metro West services, in comparison with Helen, that step-free access is accessible, because there's no wheelchair access at Nailsea, there's no wheelchair access at Western. Well, there is wheelchair access, but you have to go across the bar across it. And although the new lift at Lawrence Hill is a welcome addition, there's still a long way to go, and I'm pretty sure you're aware. But the main problem is for this committee is making sure that they do their bit in upholding the infrastructure of public transport.
Thank you very much indeed for that statement, Brendan, and please do pass on our best to David
Yeah,
as well. We've noted that statement, and that does conclude public forum for this meeting. Thank you all to the members of the public. I'm seeing a hand from Councillor Rippington, so we'll take that quickly before we move on.
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to express a bit of disappointment really at the engagement levels for these meetings, but I do suspect that that's partly because nobody knows that they're even happening. So I'm just wondering whether we can have a think about this for next year, because we know that this process happens every year at the same sort of time. Is there any way that we can kind of engage better with people so that they know? Because we know that there are people out there who are interested in this kind of stuff, like Brendan and other people, and they're entitled to have their say. But it's really disappointing to be playing to an empty gallery, if you like, in terms of that. So maybe we can have a think for next year about how we make sure that people are aware that these meetings happen and that they can come along and have their say.
Thank you, Councillor, and you're quite right. I think we've all shared that feeling. This is an important meeting. It would be good to have more public engagement. I've put it out on my socials as well. There's been budget consultation, which has announced this and so on. And of course, I think that it's a relatively small subset. I think we'd all in the bubble we exist in, we all wish it was larger, of people who engage with council meetings at all. And frankly, I think especially for the topic of finances, it's not the most exciting for a lot of people, even though we all know how important it is. But then I think none of us would be sitting where we are now if we weren't slightly unusual in our commitment to local politics. It's a very good question. It is something I would like to discuss cross-party once we've concluded this process, and how we do it better and how we make this process more accessible to the public, because we all know how important this is for the services that we provide in the city. So I would hope that we can work together on trying to raise engagement for the next time round. Thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 3, which is the 2026-27 budget and medium-term financial plan developing budget, continued from yesterday's meeting. As I'll repeat some of the preamble from yesterday, so excuse me for that, members. But as indicated on the agenda and as per the detail included in the papers, the Finance Subcommittee will today continue to review and discuss developing budget proposals across policy committee remits. Policy committee chairs and relevant senior officers are here to respond to member questions. Today, we will be reviewing saving proposals in relation to the public health and communities, homes and housing delivery, including the housing revenue account budget, transport and connectivity, and children and young people, including the dedicated schools grant policy committees. We will take a short comfort break about halfway following discussion of the homes and housing delivery portfolio. I would remind members that the Finance Subcommittee's role over these sessions is to comment on proposals and provide scrutiny, and that we do not have decision-making powers. Following today's meeting, our comments from across both sessions will be compiled and formally reported to the meeting of Strategy and Resources on the 2nd of February, when the Strategy and Resource Committee will also review budget recommendations to be submitted to full council budget meeting on the 12th of February 2026. And as a reminder, the council does have a duty to deliver a balanced budget. As per yesterday's session, as we go through the meeting, it would again be helpful if we identify areas where we have a good consensus across party lines of where it's appropriate to take particular savings proposals forward. Inevitably, we'll have differences of political view about certain proposals, and I would urge that we can all be transparent about that, and we can, if need be, reference in the report those differences. I, again, will just emphasise, I think we've had some really good collaborative cross-party work as part of this committee over the last year, and including yesterday's discussions. And I very much hope we can continue in that vein today. And I'll just remind members again that we do have all of these savings here, and they are all currently required to assist in the ultimate delivery of a balanced budget, although of course we all do wish we had more money. Now I would like to introduce Councillor Williams to talk us through the Public Health and Communities Policy Committee and take any questions from members. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I begin by lamenting the lack of Christmas jumpers? I took heart from what Councillor Ribberton said on Tuesday, and I've made the effort today, and he's turned up in, I think, a grey little number over there. So, but I am quite hot. It is very hot in here, so I may have to whip it off, particularly if you make me all hot and bothered through your questions. I've got John and Patsy here to help me out, if necessary, on the growth and regeneration side of the committee. I don't have colleagues from Public Health. The Director of Public Health sends her apologies. She's at a joint overview and scrutiny committee of Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire today, and we agreed it was better that she was at that, and I can probably field the public health questions anyway, but if there is anything that is very technical and I can't, we'll have to get back to you in writing. I won't say much in way of introduction, Chair. I'm just happy to take questions, apart from just an overall reminder that the committee does spend over 100 million in gross expenditure, so it is a significant spending committee, but an awful lot of that expenditure is offset either by government grants. Of course, the public health grant, roughly 40 million, is the most significant, but we bring in a lot of commercial income and other income as well, particularly on the growth and regeneration side of the committee. So our net call on the general fund, which is what we're primarily here to talk about, is actually quite modest. If we cast our minds back to last year, this was quite a dramatic meeting at that time because some proposals were on the table and hadn't been politically taken off the table at the time we were discussing them. The most significant was potential cuts to the library service. Those are not on the table this year. The 8 committee chairs and the deputy leader took the decision that we were not going to offer up cuts to the revenue budget of the library service this year. However, there is an adjustment to the library's budget to which I would draw your attention. It affects the capital budget and the revenue budget, and that's how we finance the acquisition of books, which thus far has been a call on revenue, roughly 330,000 a year. We're proposing that from next year onwards we capitalise the acquisition of books. Books obviously have an enduring value. We do expect people to bring them back to the library, and they may well stay on the shelf for more than 4 years. So that's an accounting adjustment, which is quite surprising. It's not been done before. Last year, we also had a significant item on the table, which was mainly adjusted out when we came to budget setting in February, and that was the Impact Fund, the funding for the third iteration of the Bristol Impact Fund, where there was an amendment to reverse that cut out, but the amendment didn't fully reverse it out. It was a Labour amendment, which Liberal Democrat and Conservative councillors also supported. But 110,000 was still left as a cut over the next few years. So that is showing up as a budget adjustment for the forthcoming year. That meant when we were allocating grants at the last Public Health and Communities meeting, we were able to allocate the large grants and the medium grants, which is all the committee decides, but we haven't opened applications for the small grants, which are delegated to the officers and myself, because we will need that 110,000 in order to do it. So I'm hoping, as the budget process evolves, and I don't mind whether it comes from the administration or whether it comes from elsewhere, that we find a way of putting that 110,000 back in the budget, but at the moment it is shown as a pressure. The biggest item in the capital budget going forward, apart from capitalisation of book acquisitions, is Canford Cemetery. That's renewal of the crematorium, not the cemetery. That's the renewal of the furnaces, which is quite a big ticket item, but I'm happy to answer questions. I'm sure John and Patsy are as well, if you have them. There are other items of some interest, which mainly arise both in environmental health and in domestic violence because of changes in grants that we know are going to change in the future, either from the Home Office or for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. But I'll happily take questions on those.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for that introduction. Can I invite members to ask any questions? Thank you. Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Williams, for your presentation. Just a comment and a question, actually. I think that the capitalisation of library books is a good example of creative thinking, and I know that previously at Finance Committee I have asked if there are things that can be capitalised which are currently expensed, and it's good to see that that thought is going into that process. My question relates to the parks turnover provision, 185,000, and I just wondered if you can provide a bit of detail on that, please.
This is where I'm probably going to need inspiration from behind me, because it could be a variety of issues. There are some staffing pressures in there at the moment, but I think some of our income from concessions that were set in previous budgets and parking income has not been as good as it might have been. So I think it's a mix of things, but rather than get the detail wrong, I'll hand over to Patsy.
So the turnover provision is it's quite a strange thing. Some services have them, some don't. Park services is a large service. In the summer, when we have our temporary staff, we have around about 230 people in the park service. And a turnover provision is an accounting way of saying as you have so many staff, your turnover will be high. So we will make an allowance where you will meet this income target, where you will not be spending that on salaries because your turnover of staff is so high. However, in Parks, most of our teams have been with us 30, 14, in some cases 50 years. So our turnover provision we cannot hit because we don't have a constant turnover of staff, because it takes 3 or 4 months to recruit someone. So in that time, you're not spending that vacancy. So there's a calculation that says if you have an X amount of turnover per year, this is what you will not spend on salaries. But I would say over 90% of our park staff are long-term members of staff, and our turnover is very, very low. So it creates a pressure on that service every year, and we've raised it as a pressure this year, and it has been met.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was helpful because, I had in my own mind what it might be, and it was nothing like that. So that's that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan?
I think Tim was first.
Oh, excuse Councillor Rippington then.
Thanks. Can I just ask come back on Jonathan's point first? Given that Parks turnover has historically been very low, should we not have taken that into account when building this in, or is this across all the? Is the same figure just used across all the departments? Could we not have anticipated that we wouldn't have much turnover, given that we never do, that we don't historically?
So it's quite a strange one. I think it predates probably 3 or 4 finance directors, and it doesn't apply to all services. And we do raise it as a pressure every year because we know that we can't make the turnover provision. And this time we were able to get that provision met.
So will we remove it in future so that it doesn't become a recurring pressure?
Yeah, Councillor Ripperton, is it okay if I come in? So this was discussed when we had our budget review groups. We have got a select set of services where they have had not budget at 100%, it's budget at below 100% on the basis that there'll be periods of turnover, so you don't need the full 100%. The case that's put forward by Patsy and colleagues is that based on actual expenditure for the last couple of years, that target hasn't been hit, so the 100% of budgets. We didn't put it back to 100%, actually. What we put it back to is the recurrent spend against the budget that's over. So we're just truing up the budget. So some councils have turnover across every bit of the establishment, every budget in the council. The first council I worked at had a 95% budget rule where they'd only fund 95% of the establishment. That worked in some services where there was turnover and vacancies were held, but other services that had operational demand and you needed to bring an agency where staff left meant that those services would continue to overspend. So I've taken a view that we need to be consistent in Bristol City Council. We don't want one rule for one particular service and another rule for another service. So if we have got an identified pressure because that turnover is not achievable, that's why we put it forward as a pressure.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor?
I think so, yeah.
Thank you very much.
That wasn't the question. Yeah.
Okay.
That was
carry on then.
You know what I mean. Apologies for that. Yeah. I've got a question on the capital expenditure for the cremators. My understanding is that the cremators are one of the biggest contributors to sort of carbon output within the city, and if looking to decarbonise, they're one of the biggest one of the biggest problems we've got. If we're replacing them, are we replacing them with something that will help us to achieve our decarbonisation targets?
Yes, that's part of the reason for doing it. They're also quite old. I think they're about 40 years old, the ovens that are there, so they would need replacing anyway, but they're currently gas-fired, and the proposal is that they will be electric-powered in future, so that certainly helps with the decarbonisation, and that then impacts on the financing, which you may be interested in as well, because it then involves Ameresco. But there's also a clean air or quality issue as well, so there's going to be mercury abatement put in in future as well. So it's not only a sort of carbon emitter, but it's an emitter of nasty stuff as well. So it's going to be a much improved service from an environmental perspective going forward, as well as hopefully a good quality service for the public. We might even be able to heat the chapel, which rather surprisingly is not heated at the moment.
Well, that's particularly good news, I would say. And just related question in terms of crematoria, why are we seeing demand go down for cremations? I can't believe it's because less people are dying, to put it, bluntly. But so, is there a reason why we're not getting the income we were expecting from crematoria?
I'll let Patsy elaborate in a second, but yeah, there is a pressure this year of $250,000. We're expecting to income levels to recover next year, so net it reverses out to about 250,000, 235,000 to come back in the following year, so 15,000 overall. And I know our head of service, Ariaf, has been talking to funeral directors as to what changes that are taking place in the market, why there might be particular reasons they're not using Bristol cemeteries or crematorium. Some of it may have been the uncertainty that we had for a while over the future of South Bristol Cemetery, perhaps, and people looked elsewhere, but there's also changes in what people want for their farewell as well, with direct cremations, woodland burials and so on, which are services that currently Bristol doesn't provide. But Patsy's the expert on this, so if you want to elaborate.
So as Councillor Williams says, it's a whole range of things. It's not just one thing. So we are slightly down on deaths still. So since COVID, I think we were down between 6 and 8% each year on deaths, because so many people died throughout COVID who perhaps would have lived another couple of years. That's starting to average out now, but we are still, I think it's around 3-4% lower on deaths so far this year. We are now coming into the winter season, so that's usually our busiest time. It sounds really morbid talking like this, but it is our normal busiest time. But it's also a range of other factors, as Councillor Williams says, that there is a change in demand for direct cremations, woodland burials. There's also the cost. We did have 80% of the market share. That's slightly dropped. Westerly is a very modern, very beautiful location, and we charge the same price as Westerly. So it's also competition. We keep an eye on our competitors' prices, and we try to be as competitive as we can. But it's not just one thing, it's a whole range that's feeding into that lack of demand.
Thanks. Can I just come back very quickly? So the fact that we're expecting to recoup most of the pressure in the following year, I think the explanation about the COVID explanation makes more sense there, because the other ones about people choosing other types of burial, I suspect that's just going to continue. So we're unlikely to regain that kind of thing. But I must admit, I hadn't thought about the fact that a lot of people died prematurely due to COVID, and therefore there's obviously been a kind of like that, and presumably we're just starting to come out of that now.
I would add as background, the committee we've got our policy workshop, as we all have, at the end of January next year. We are already more or less committed to having a task and finish group looking at the burials and cremations service going forward. That's partly as a result of the decisions we made about South Bristol, but also the Law Commission has been cogitating for quite some time on national changes to burial practice. For instance, about how many people are allowed to be stacked probably isn't the appropriate word, but I think you get what I mean. In a grave is going to change going forward, and that will potentially open up graves that are currently closed. So there's a lot of issues to look at locally, and in terms of changes in the national law. So there will be a task and finish group being set up over the next year to look at the range of these issues, including where we get our income from, because it is. I do sometimes wince when Patsy talking to me in private about how we describe the service, but it does bring in a significant amount of money into the City Council, and it does support our parks and green spaces. So it is something that we want to provide that is good for people of Bristol and is future-proof, but it's also important to us in terms of revenue as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Logan, I hope your question is a wee bit cheerier.
I mean, it's about domestic violence. So the question is, could you explain the pressures? Because you've explained most of the pressures, and there's an assumption there that I think it's mainly technical around funding changes, but I think it's important that people know what that means and what the impact of that pressure is.
Well, as Christina isn't here and she knows this inside out, I know she's briefed the Executive Director for Resources about this, so he may assist me in a second. But there's a mixture of changes here. First of all, the grants that we used to get directly from the Home Office specifically for combating domestic violence or male violence against women are now rolled into the core funding that the local authority gets from MHCLG, so that's part of it. So the money hasn't disappeared from the council, but it's no longer hypothecated to my committee's budget. It's in the general fund. It's been put into a pool, as it were, but we'll need to scoop it out and spend it here. So it's not disappeared. But Andy may want to elaborate on that. Similarly, we also get some grants from Claire Moody's budgets, which she then gets from the Home Office, and she's indicated that she wants to change the mix of these going forward. So we're anticipating that. That's as far as my understanding goes, but I think Christina's been talking to Andy because she wasn't able to be here. Have I got that right, or is there something to add?
You've definitely got it right, Councillor Williams. So, and we'll probably tweak the narrative in the final budget proposals, call them technical adjustments, because what they are is where there's a number of grants we get directly from government at the moment, like the domestic violence one that goes directly to the public health service. That's now coming as a bundled grant as core funding. So it's an adjustment to remove the income line from a service where it's expecting a grant to come in to fund activity, because it's now going to become part of the core funding. It's really part of the government fair funding review to go from hundreds of grants that come into the council to a rationalised few grants to our core funding settlement.
That's what I thought. The reason for asking, if I were a service user, I wouldn't know where. Is it fair to say that the impact on service users is nil? Is that right?
I believe that is the correct interpretation. Yes. So the money hasn't disappeared. It's just been held centrally rather than specifically by my committee's budget.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Brown, then Gemfrey, then Thomas.
My questions have kind of already been asked, but maybe just to follow on a little bit from that, because I noticed that it's not just the domestic abuse funding, there's funding on homelessness prevention as well, which is also being subsumed into the general settlement, and it's maybe a question more for officers than politicians about, well, politicians will have our own answer to this, I guess, but maybe from an officer point of view, how confident are we that those will remain a settled part of the settlement going forward as part of the fairer funding formula, so that we can continue to maintain those services and keep up with inflation, or at least the rise in the settlement as time goes by.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Well, we'll be more confident when we get the provisional settlement from government, because that will give us the exact allocation. But at the moment, the government policy statement does state a number of grants that are now being wrapped in. But the devil's in the detail. We need to get the provisional settlement so we can point to all of the existing grants, and then the new funding that we get basically as a single line coming in, and make sure we've got suitable funding so we don't have any reduction in service. It does just become continuation of funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gemfrey.
Yeah, thank you. My question was about the impact funds savings on page 22, and about why the 110 is back on the table if the saving was previously agreed. I might be missing something, but is there not the risk that if this 110 is, that means that that small grants for the Bristol Impact Fund won't be available? Can you explain a bit more?
Yeah, I touched on this, thank you, Shona. Touched on this in my introduction, that this time last year, the proposal on the table was for a cut, I think it was roughly 880,000 over the 4 years been taken out, and that was still there when we got to full council. There was an amendment tabled by the Labour group, which had various other things wrapped up with it, to reverse those cuts, but it didn't reverse the full amount, so we were still left with 110,000 being cut. Unfortunately, and this is embarrassing all round, I suppose I'm primarily responsible as I'm the committee chair, but a paper went to my committee in May in order to open applications for the third round of the fund, and it put in the figure as if the full cut had been reversed rather than roughly 770,000 had been reversed. That's unfortunate, and lots of people didn't spot it. I often say, as I have a fellow member of the committee in the room at the end of the meeting, that 9 eyes is better than 1. When you're looking at decisions on that occasion, the 9 eyes missed that as well, but we all missed it, professionally and politically. So it is still there. I am hopeful that an executive director is going to find 110,000 down the back of his sofa so that we can put this back into the budget when we get to February, because it would be a shame if we weren't able to offer a small grants programme.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas, to wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. I think it kind of seems fairly clear picture, thank you, in terms of proposed cost savings and emerging pressures. Something that I'm particularly keen on is just our ability to be able to meet the budgets that we actually set. And I know this is linked to emerging pressures, but leaving aside the public health grant last year, we set a budget for, or you set a budget for public health and communities of 16.8, and it looks like we're going to be spending about £1 million more than that for the outturn of the year. So I just wondered what the reasons for that excess of spending over the budget that we set for the year are.
I think just for clarity, Jerome, I think is that because you're adding up all the cost pressures? I think I've got the right page in front of me. 880,000.
I'm going from the management accounts that were presented to the October Strategy and Resources, which had a 16.8 original budget for the year and a 17.8 million outcome, excluding the public health budget of 43 million.
I may need help here. I don't remember. But there is an issue that detailed accounts don't come to the rest of the committees at the moment. I had got in place a proposal that my committee saw a lot of detail, and now the detail goes to Strategy and Resources and not to us. I'm not aware we're $1 million over. And as you say, the public health side of it is definitely in balance.
The executive director resources
is poised. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomas. I think I've just looked at the October report. I think you're looking at the original opening balance, which is the approved budget. So when we set the budget, we have the opening budget, because there's what we call budget journals happen throughout the year. Budgets change, so the revised budget, the second column, is the 17.6 million. Forecast at period 5 was 17.8 million, so there's a £200,000 variance at that time, but I think the budget is getting back on track.
So are you saying that the original budget figure on the left there was not the budget we set, it was actually the varied budget, rather than being a mid-year adjustment?
So we have each period we report, we have budget journals, so the revised budget is the movement in year, so that becomes the current in-year budget.
I still don't understand. Let's pick it up outside the meeting.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, councillors. If there's no great objection, I will end this item here, as I'm conscious of time and Councillor Parsons has a hop. So thank you very much, Councillor Williams, for attending and answering the committee's questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Right, we'll do our usual musical chairs for a moment, and then we'll get started with homes and housing. Councillor Parsons, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to introduce yourself and your portfolio, and then we'll open up to questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk about the Homes and Housing Delivery Budget. So my name is Barry Parsons. I am Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee. Would you like me to give a brief introduction to the budget?
Yes, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. So the Homes and Housing Delivery Budget consists of two parts, really. There's a general fund element to it, and there's the housing revenue account, which is a ring-fenced account, the income from which largely derives from rents and fees paid by our residents. Each of these two parts of the budget really serve different elements of our strategic priorities as a council. So for the general fund, as you will see from the papers, a great deal of our investment and our spending has to do with tackling homelessness, and also to do with enabling and delivering new housing across the city. And there's an element in there as well, you'll see, which is around the pressures that we face because of the growing population of people living in vehicles in the city. The story of the housing revenue account is really very much bound up with the story of our journey in recovery from a negative regulatory judgment that we received last year from a C3 to what we aim to be a C1 rating for the safety and quality in the service that we deliver to our residents. We see a safe and decent home as a basic foundation for people to be able to live a healthy and fulfilled life, and it's very important to us that we invest to deliver that, because this is something that we've failed to do as a council in the past. The context for the housing revenue account then includes the journey from a C3 to a C1 rating, and that involves a whole range of different activities. So we're currently in the middle of a program of surveying the condition of all our homes. We are remediating unsafe cladding on our taller buildings, and we're also investing to meet the challenges of new regulation which is welcome but introduces new burdens to us, a new financial burden. That includes Awab's law, that includes the expected new Decent Homes Standard, Decent Homes 2 as it's called, a new home energy model. We've committed to retrofitting our homes to improving their energy efficiency, replacing gas, removing gas entirely from all of our homes, and reducing bills for our residents. It's also very important going forward that we demonstrate transparency of cost and value for money. All of these things lead to significant financial pressures for the council. Excuse me, I'm just going to get back into my laptop. We're investing huge amounts into Bristol's homes, though. We've got an HRA capital programme which is approaching £1 billion over the next 10 years. Including also on the general fund side, nearly £50 million on housing enabling and delivery, which enables investment by our partners into new homes. 37 million on tackling homelessness, 30 million plus on decarbonisation and leading to a just transition, and 20 million on housing adaptation so that people can stay in their homes if they're living with disability. We're also building over 500 new social rent homes. Now, getting into the detail. Oops, sorry, I'm putting the wrong password in. Here we go. There we go. So emerging pressures for the general fund are of the order of 5 million plus. A big part of that relates to what we expect to be happening with our homelessness and rough sleeping grants. As has been indicated, these are going to be rolled into a core settlement. That's welcome in some respects because it means that we'll have more flexibility in how we spend that grant. What's less welcome is that we expect the funding formula that will be used will lead to an overall reduction in our grant. That's going to be a huge pressure for us. Also, as indicated, cost associated with the management of vehicle dwellers. We have a huge and very innovative, I would say, program in the Tackling Homelessness program, which includes a number of very innovative savings proposals having to do with things like private financing options for delivering temporary accommodation and thereby reducing our subsidy loss on that accommodation, which is a big financial pressure for the council and has led to other councils becoming effectively bankrupt. We're not in that position. We are reducing our subsidy loss year on year now through this kind of work and this innovation and the work that we're doing to prevent homelessness as well. In the housing revenue account, we've got over £7 million of emerging pressures, including rent loss from the government's changes to right to buy rules, which led to a very large increase in right to buy applications in a very short period of time last autumn. We do, though, have around 10 million plus of savings proposals. A major contributor to that actually is the ability to increase our rents. There are, again, challenges there which have been introduced by the fact the government has delayed a decision on what's called rent convergence. Our rents are below national formula rents, and the government has consulted on the ability for providers like us to increase those rents so that we can get more closer to what's a sort of national standard rent. We were expecting a decision on that this autumn. That's now been delayed till next year. That introduces significant risk for us. Then on capital investment, we're investing over £2 million in Gypsy, Roma and Traveller and Van Dweller sites. We've also got a very ambitious 93 million investor save programme, which relates to increasing the availability of better quality temporary accommodation for households experiencing homelessness. And then in the housing revenue account, we're increasing again this year. So last year we increased our investment in our existing homes. Again, we're now increasing by 20 million investment in things like health and safety, decent homes, affordable warmth and adaptations, as well as over 140 million for those 500 plus new social housing units. As I said, rent convergence is a big uncertainty for us and could add a very large pressure. As always, there are challenges around the delivery of savings and of development schemes. Slippage is a constant challenge when you're doing development and a big capital investment program, as we are. We are very challenged with something called the interest cover ratio for our housing revenue account as well. This is a measure that we use to ensure that we're borrowing prudentially. All of those pressures make it very hard for us to meet that, and we have a real challenge at the moment in that currently we haven't yet identified savings that would bring us within our acceptable interest cover ratio. So there's more work to do there. Thank you. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but it's a very, very complex budget. So welcome your questions.
I'm very sorry that we don't have any more public forum scheduled for today. I'm sorry to be harsh on this. May I suggest you bring this as a public forum item to the next meeting of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, please? I'm afraid we don't have any more public forum today. I'm sorry for that. I do need to stick to the procedure and the timings on this, I'm afraid to say. But I would encourage you to come to the next Homes and Housing Delivery Committee with your questions, or the next full council meeting indeed. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, Councillor Parsons. I would just like to remind members, Councillor Parsons has a hard stop at 15:15, so if we can keep the questions as succinct as possible. And officers who were not here yesterday, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves and your role just before you speak for the first time. Thank you very much. Councillor Gemfrey first.
Yeah, I just had a question about the maths on it, which I'm sure there's a perfectly good explanation. But on page 33, under the Invest to Save ones, so for it doesn't seem to be adding up. So, for example, the 93,000, that is 45 plus 3. It looks like the top line has been doubled for every single number, and I'm sure there's a good reason, but I don't understand why.
Okay, so
sorry, can I refer that to Andy, please?
Was there a correction went round?
There was a correction in the pack, so there's an updated table. So apologies for that error. There was a spreadsheet gremlin that got taken out, so it's in the updated pack that was distributed.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm sorry. I've got. That makes sense. I've got a separate question. Sorry, which was just about the savings, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to double check. So on page 28, about the savings, where we're looking to secure 250 homes for temporary accommodation. So that's under savings, although it sounds like it costs, but is that because the costs come under the Invest to Save or one of the other? So we're going to be saving on the general fund because we're putting money into the houses through a different page of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's it. So this is a capital investment to the financial impact of which will be to reduce what's called our subsidy loss. So at the moment, what happens is if somebody becomes homeless in our city and we have a duty to house them, if we house that household in, say, a privately rented flat, which is something that we may have to do because of a lack of supply, then the amount of income that we receive from housing benefit from the government is less than what we have to pay in rent. Conversely, if we're able to secure exempt accommodation for somebody, if we're able to secure accommodation that's provided by a registered provider, say, then we can cover the full rate of that cost, and we also have the benefit that we're able to provide support to that household as well. So if they require support to be able to move on into an independent tenancy, for example, that's the kind of support we can then provide. So it's a benefit to our finances, but it's also, really importantly, it's a benefit to those households as well.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thank you. You covered off my first question, which had been about the right to buy proposals, but I was just looking, sorry, I just need to find my place again. It's about rent convergence. So you talked about the issue of rent convergence, but I was looking at the papers and I couldn't see it mentioned. Am I right in saying we hadn't assumed that in the savings proposals, or have I missed it in the savings proposals? Is the government's delay in deciding on rent convergence making an immediate impact to our budgeting process, or is that just a warning for the future, I think is the question?
Yes, it absolutely is. It's having an immediate impact on us. So we had, we thought conservatively actually assumed that that of the two potential rates of rent convergence that the government was consulting on, so either at £1 a week or £2 a week, we were assuming that they would make an announcement introducing rent convergence at the lower rate of £1 a week, which would have benefited our housing revenue account, but by a lower amount. What they've actually done is delayed that decision, so we now have no certainty whether we're going to be able to apply that rent convergence and therefore that uplift to our finances at all.
Thanks. Sorry, apologies. I think I was, trying to follow you at the same time as trying to find it in the paper, so struggling to do both adequately. Just on that, do we know when they've delayed? I know what these things can be like, so it could be how long is a piece of string type question, but do we know when that decision's been deferred to? When are we likely to hear, if at all, if we know at all?
So we've been indicated that it would be early in the new year. I think late January, was it potentially? Yeah, late January.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Barry. I also want to talk about subsidy loss. Looking back a year or so, two of the things that we thought, the council do lots of good work on subsidy loss, and I think we need to be proud of those things that we do. But 12 months ago, two of the things that we thought would have an impact is acquisitions and developing a council-owned RSL. And the acquisitions programme has happened up to a point. That is happening. So is it possible to determine whether that is having the impact that we thought it was? And if so, should we be doing more of it? And on the council-owned housing association, that isn't referred to here. I'm assuming we will do that, and if we do that, it would have an impact. So are you expecting to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think both of those things are true. So the acquisitions programme is ongoing. In fact, it's running slightly ahead of where we'd hoped. So that's really good news. We report regularly to the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee on the Tackling Homelessness programme, and that does include some information on subsidy loss that we've avoided. So certainly for last year, the last full year, we were forecasting that we may have been losing anything up to 17 million in subsidy loss, but we'd actually, with all the mitigations that we brought in, we actually reduced that so that it was at around 12 million, which is the first time that our subsidy loss has gone down. So definitely the acquisitions programme and all of the other innovation that we're doing around this area is making a big impact there. At a time when the numbers of households becoming homeless is still increasing across the country, including in Bristol. So yeah, so that's a really positive story, and it is something that, as I say, is progressing actually slightly faster than we'd hoped. On the council-owned register provider, that's not been included in these figures because a decision on whether or not to go ahead with it hasn't been made. So the business case is being worked up at the moment, and a decision would be made by the Strategy and Resources Committee next year.
Okay, thank you. And if I could ask a question on the HRA. So one of the big decisions in that area is the sustainability of the current programme over the period and how much headroom there is or isn't. And in the short term, there definitely isn't. I think that's fairly unambiguous. I think we understand the impact of the interest cover ratio particularly. There does appear, on the current assumption, there does appear to be more headroom in previous years, so in future years 3 to 5, that kind of sense. So my question is, how far has that been benchmarked? So have we used external organisations like Savills, for example, to test that? And because it's important to be prudent, and it's important not to overcommit potential headroom, but it's also important to not lose an opportunity that is there by being too prudent. So how do we know what the right balance of that is, and how far is that judgment externally benchmarked?
Yeah, that's really important questions. I think I'll ask officers to respond in more detail in a second, but certainly, as you say, if you look at the figures, it looks like there is considerably more headroom for borrowing and therefore headroom for investment in future years. And I think we always knew that next year's budget was going to be the real crunch year in terms of the sustainability of the housing revenue account, our ability to meet our interest cover ratio. There's a lot of stuff that isn't yet in there. So we've made, for example, with the Decent Home Standard, we don't know yet exactly what that is going to be. And so we've made some assumptions around what the cost of investing in our homes so that they meet the next iteration of the Decent Home Standard. It's likely to mean that we will need to invest more in order to meet that standard than the current one. We also haven't included in that the costs that will emerge from the condition surveys that we're currently doing on our homes. So those surveys that we're doing will enable us to make much better informed decisions about the investment needs for those homes over the 30-year business plan, which I anticipate will include the need for estate renewal as well. There will be homes, there will be buildings that we own which are reaching the end of their designed life, and we'll have to make decisions about whether to refurbish them or whether to demolish and rebuild. And so none of that is yet included in those costs. So there's a lot of uncertainty still there to unpick, which we're going to be working on over the next few months as we begin to develop our asset management strategy, which is going to hopefully answer a lot more of those questions. But I'm going to hand over to officers as well, because I think they'll be able to talk a bit more, not only about that, but also about the external validation of our budget.
Hi, I'm Martin Johnson, Finance Business Partner for Housing. We do use Savills to validate our business plan. They have had a look at the early draft of the plan, and with particular not with particular focus on, but they did particularly comment on the level of investment in existing stock. They did comment that we currently have a low provision in the business plan for that, but that's for all the reasons that Councillor Parsons has just outlined there. We know that there's uncertainty in the level of investment in our stock, but the plan demonstrates that there is capacity in future years that can be used for that investment. When we get the final version of the business plan, Savills will again review it and validate it and produce a report at that point on the business plan. They also review all of the assumptions, all of the key assumptions around inflation, our rent levels, CPI, interest rates. They basically do a full review of the business plan and produce a report on it.
And is that report shared with the Housing Committee?
I don't think we have shared it previously. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's share it. That would be good.
Thank you. Councillor Hucker?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Barry. I've just got a couple of questions on the General Fund, actually. Mm-hmm. You mentioned about the homelessness prevention grant being rolled into the core funding. That's 3.3 million. When I read the papers and I saw core funding will increase to offset this, I thought, okay, that's fine, that's cost neutral. But based on what you said, that doesn't appear to be the case. So I wondered if you had an indication of what the net cost of that would be.
Yeah, we've got some considerable uncertainty, I think, at the moment. It's fair to say about our homelessness grants. There are several grant schemes at the moment which the government has indicated that there will be consolidating into one. There are elements to that which are welcome. So one element is that we will have more flexibility in how we spend that grant allocation. There's also a move to longer term settlements, so 3 years rather than 1, which is also welcome. However, we haven't been given our final allocation yet, but the modelling that we've commissioned suggests that we are looking at a cut, quite a considerable cut. Do you want to talk more about that? Yeah. So yeah, we estimate, based on the modelling that we've done, like I say, we haven't been given the figures, but we think that's 1.3 million a year, which our services cannot support. That would be a severe impact on our ability to support homeless households. So we don't see any way of that being absorbable without, at the very least, the government applying a taper. It's a significant concern.
Yes, thank you. That is a significant impact. I see that WECA are now doing work on homelessness, so I'm not sure if they might have any capacity to compensate in any sense for this reduction. Just a thought. I'm not expecting an answer to that. Yeah, my other question related to the pressures on managing the growth of vehicle dwellers. I see that 500,000 is figure that's quoted for that. I wondered if any of that related to the provision of Meanwell sites, and if it did, whether it would be possible to capitalise any of that expenditure to keep it off of the income and expenditure account.
Yeah, those are good points. I mean, yes, it does, I think one of the interesting things about the provision of Meanwell sites is that, as by and large they are, we're providing them on land that is earmarked for future development. A lot of the work that we need to do in order to prepare those sites for use, for Meanwell use by vehicle dwellers, will also mean that they are more ready for development in future years. You know, we'll have to make sure that they are, that they're remediated in various ways. So there are various benefits to our development program actually for Meanwell use of this kind, including site security and things like that. As to the questions about capitalisation, I'm not an accountant, so I better pass over, I think.
So there's a capital pressure included within the budget as well for the actual delivery of these Meanwell sites, and included within those capital costs are any staff costs associated with actually delivering the site and constructing that asset. The 500,000 revenue pressure there is the business as usual of actually dealing with the problem of van dwellers within the city.
Okay, thanks for explaining. Thanks.
Thank you. We're down to the last 5 minutes now, so I'll just repeat the reminder about succinctness, please. Councillor Jumfrey? Did you not? Oh, excuse me. Well, then I've got a quick question then, and we'll come to Councillor Rippington, if that's all right. You see what I did there? Last year, there was some reports in the media about conveyancing costs for our acquisitions programme. I was just wondering if we knew roughly what we were expecting to be paying for conveyancing costs for when we purchase new properties for either of the funds, please.
Not off the top of my head, sorry.
I think last year the figure was about 14,000 per property, which seemed very high, and I think wasn't confirmed when I raised it at this meeting last time round.
I don't think that was just conveyancing costs. That included other things as well, such as Simplify's fee. So the conveyancing cost is just the legal cost. But I can certainly go away. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head, but £14,000 seems astronomically high per unit.
Okay, thank you. That would be good just to have that assurance. Thank you very much. And then Councillor Rippington.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's a bit difficult to see from there. Just coming back to the to Councillor Logan's question about headroom. We understand all the uncertainties that there are about the cost of our current housing stock and how much that will cost. But there is a scenario in which, you know, it turns out that we've estimated correctly for what we're going to have to spend on maintaining our housing stock, and there will be some headroom available in future years. And we know that council housing is the best form of affordable housing that we can provide in the city to address the housing crisis. And we also know that the more of it we have, the more revenue it brings in, and newer properties require less maintenance, but bring in, you know, equal amounts of revenue. So my question really is, will we be prepared if it comes to the point where we think in 2 years' time, actually we do have headroom to go ahead? Will we be ready to, you know, will we have identified sites? Will we know what we want to do if we have the capital available to build more housing? Because it really is crucial that we build, as you know, because it's in, you know, your manifesto as well, that we build as much affordable housing as possible.
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing delivery, especially social rent, as you say, is it's incredibly important to our city, and we have a very substantial program already of social rent house building. So we're building over 500 new council homes over the next 5 years. We were named as one of the country's top 10 council house builders last year, and we're this year rather. So we're a local authority that builds, and one of the advantages that we have is that we have different routes for achieving that. So we have our in-house delivery team. And we also have Gorham Homes. We're able to build ourselves, and we're able to buy homes from Gorham. You know, we can also, you know, through our street acquisitions program, for example, we're buying from elsewhere as well. You know, we're buying existing homes. But yeah, you know, we are, I think, probably in as good a position as we possibly can be to be able to expand new delivery. We've got we've got areas of growth and regeneration across the city. We've got an enormous opportunity in Temple Quarter, amongst others. And we've also, I mentioned estate regeneration as well. You know, although there's obviously there's pressures there potentially. You know, if we have a need to demolish homes and, you know, move people away and redevelop there, but also there's potential there too. You know, we have areas of the city where, frankly, our housing isn't dense enough to be able to support the kind of neighbourhood services and businesses and things that people want. We should be densifying our city, and one of the ways that we can do that is through estate regeneration, actually. And so that's an enormous opportunity that I think we haven't really sort of tapped into yet as much as we could. So there's a range of delivery options, I think, that we will be able to take advantage of when that headroom expands. But I'd go back to the core principle that we need to make sure that we are able to assure our residents that they are safe in their homes. That's the absolute number one priority for our housing revenue account right now. We have a really fantastic enabling team as well that works with registered providers to deliver social rent hopes across the city, to get investment in from elsewhere, actually, to be able to increase delivery of social rent homes and other affordable tenures. Some sort of kind of very rough kind of back of the envelope calculations I was doing earlier. It's, we as a city over the last 4 years of the previous mayoral administration, we delivered around 1,800 affordable homes, including around 200 council. Over the 4 years of this administration, we'd be looking to deliver forecast roughly 3,000 affordable homes, including around 850 council delivery. So that's, we're building, and we're actually building more.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we are now past 4:15, so I think we'll have to draw it to a close there. But thank you very much, Councillor, for attending today and answering the committee's questions. As discussed, I think we'll now take a 10-minute comfort break. If I can encourage everyone to be back here for just after 4:25, that would be great. Thank you very much. that we are all comforted after that break. Excuse me. Thank you. We will now continue with the Transport and Connectivity Committee. Councillor Powden, if you'd like to just introduce yourself, your committee, and briefly outline your budgetary situation before we jump into questions. I appreciate Brendan has left now, but in public forum we were asked specifically a few questions about improving bus services and bus shelters, late night buses and so on. So if you are able to touch on that at any point for the record, that might be good as well. But thank you.
That's news to me, but let's see how that comes across. So, hi, my name's Councillor Ed Plowden. I'm Chair of the Transport and Connectivity Committee. I think transport's really unique. If you look at all the other committees, they start with General Fund, whereas Transport and Connectivity starts with a 14 or thereabouts £1 million income target. That's obviously funded a lot on parking, both on street and off street, and penalty charge notices. That's all very tightly regulated by Section 55 of the Road Traffic Regulation Act, so there's limited headroom, and in fact some of the pressures you'll see there is because we've been applying inflation to the income from PCNs, and that's something that we can't apply inflation to because it's nationally set. The other thing that Transport has is very significant grants. For example, the City Region's Sustainable Transport Settlement is £560 million over 5 years for the whole of WECA. We're expecting to invest something in the region of 170 million of that in capital projects, and it also helps to fund our maintenance regime. So that's one of the key pressures, is where for several years now inflation has been applied in a very blunt way, and I'm very pleased to see that the finance team are now applying that in a smarter way because we can't apply inflation to that. The other key risk obviously is the state of our infrastructure. I think that's now the #1 rated risk corporately in terms of very ageing infrastructure. And we've seen what happened on the Chocolate Path, and we've managed to avoid that on York Road. So that's key pressure. In terms of the proposals, unfortunately, CAS has not achieved compliance, the Clean Air Zone has not achieved compliance as quickly as we would have liked, but it does have the side effect of a little bit of extra money there. So we are proposing to put £1 million worth of CAS revenue into the supporting transport for 1 year only. The other draw that we may need to look at in terms of the transport levy to WECA is that although we've got quite good news just in the last week in terms of our bus grant, which funds quite a lot of the supported services, there still is a lot of pressure on that budget. So we are in discussions, and those will be concluded in time for any extra draw that we might use on CAS to be reflected in the budget that comes to full council. And then the other thing in there is some modest savings based on potentially increasing CAS charges. That's something that is subject to a committee decision at some point in the future. And I'm wondering, given that that budget sits in Transport Committee, if it should be actually decided by Transport Committee. So that's something we'll be looking at. And the other thing to mention is that the figures that don't appear in here is last year's figures, which we projected a number of, we've agreed a number of changes to parking charges. The TROs take quite a long time for those to actually come through. So those actually aren't reflected in, those won't be coming through until next year and even the year after's budget. And we have made a lot of assumptions within those, the effect of those parking charges, and we'll have to be monitoring that very, very closely to see if they come to fruition or do better than we expected. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Councillor Powden. Do we have any questions from committee members? Thank you. Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Plowden, for your presentation. Yeah, I've got just two questions, actually, on the pressures. I see that there's 240,000 put against bank charges, and when I saw that, I tried to work out what that was and why it should be charged to transport. I'm assuming that it's transaction charges on credit cards when payments are made for things like CAS, penalty charge notices, parking charges, that sort of thing. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Excuse me, sorry, Councillor Kaplan, would you mind moving mics? There's quite a lot of feedback coming from the one you're using at the moment. Still working out the kinks in the new AV.
I think the short answer to that is yes. I do know that we've got, I think we're proposing some procurement quite soon to try and regularise that position because I think is it a temporary pressure because we're looking to a better contract in the future?
We are looking to remove it in future contracts, but most of it relates to when you pay Ringo. It's the Ringo charges that are applied by Ringo when you pay to pay for parking. That's the majority of it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That's clear. Thanks. My other question, and perhaps this should be more clear to me than it is, but there's 3 items in the pressures called transport and highways fees and charges in the amount to 2.139 million in total, so a not insignificant amount. Can you provide a bit more detail on that, please, Ed, or Patsy?
So that's what I was saying about the inflation, that we've used a very blunt stick in the past to apply inflation to charges, and this is something that we can't apply inflation to because its PCN's level is set nationally. So we're having to kind of reverse some of the assumptions we made, maybe corporately.
Yeah. So.
To that? Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. I understand. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. And just a general reminder about mics again, if members can make sure they are close to the mics when using them, please. Thank you. Councillor Reppington.
Thank you. Hello, Ed. Unusual to be sat there, not there. Yeah, a couple of questions about the savings. None of the savings are actually long-term savings. They're things that we could save 1 year, but then if the money's not available the next year, it's basically becomes a sort of a pressure. Using the clean air zone to boost the levy, is there already an increase in the levy this year compared to previous years in the budget without the use of that additional million?
My understanding is one of the problems with the levy is that when it was agreed back in 2017, around about 2020, that there was no inflation built in. Bus services, as we know, Tim, have been increased by something like 30 or 40% since that time. And so there's a much wider piece of work looking at the long-term future of the levy and how that gets funded. We actually are funding the levy, I think, in more or less in total, or to a very large extent, from the CAS for the last couple of years, or last year and the next couple of year or two. But that corporately is known, and then the effect of reversing that out when CAS starts declining is covered corporately. Mm-hmm. So it's a risk that I've been quite worried about. But again, this £1 million is a temporary thing while we do some. We're going to have some quite. We're in the middle of constructive negotiations with WECA about the future of the levy, but this is to cope with the 1 year pressure. And as I say, the pressure may go up. The bus grant is good news, so the pressure shouldn't be too much, but we are having a look at that.
So my follow-up question was going to be: should it turn out that some of the pressures on the existing supported services that WECA provide on our behalf can be funded through the bus grant, would we be able to use some of this money ourselves to continue to provide better bus services for Bristol as we've done over the last year?
There's sort of two bits to that question. I think there's are we going to be cutting existing supported services that WECA supports? And that's where I was saying in my introduction that we are, if we do need to top up more than this for the next year, despite the fairly good bus grant allocation, then we'll have to bring some more figures into that. We're negotiating with WECA during January. So we'll be that if we do need any more from CAS, then that will be reflected in the overall budget. I think there's a second question there, is if CAS continues to perform well, then I think we'd be looking to work exactly in the way we did to see what we can use, how we can use it directly to support bus services. And again, it would be WECA that would need to contract those, but we would be able to do that within Bristol.
Okay, yeah, so, well, you know, hopefully the bus grant will help to provide the services that are coming up for renewal in 2026. We've got a 3-year bus grant now, so it should give some sort of stability there, and then maybe there'll be some money left over for us to do other things with. That would be good. The second question relating to Clean Air Zone is about the possible increased charges. As you say, that doesn't come to Transport Committee, but it did come to Environmental Committee, I think, where it was rejected. So do the figures in here, were they put in before that decision was taken, or are these done on the assumption that that will come back to committee and next time it will pass?
That's done on the assumption that like many proposals throughout this whole session that you're doing, that the committee will pass those. The reason it was rejected by the committee was twofold. One was that the modelling wasn't complete, and therefore we couldn't demonstrate that this was going to have the effect that we want it to have. And the second was that they said, well, and then you're going to ask the Transport Committee to actually put that through, and that's not very satisfactory. So I think on the first of those, we've now got some modelling which the initial modelling shows that it will have an impact, and the impact that we were hoping for. Maybe not quite as much as we would like, but again, there's still some further modelling that needs to happen. And the second part of that is, I think, where we probably need to, if this is our budget line, we need to own that in transport. And as I say, there's a lot of assumptions in a lot of the parking increases that are still coming through and due to hit the budget next year and the year after, and we're going to have to monitor that across the whole piece.
Thank you. John Smith had his hand up there. He's been waiting. Just wondering if you would like to come in.
Yes, just to support what Councillor Plowden said, and particularly what Councillor Plowden said at the start of the session. I think it might be helpful just to go over that again as well. So the line, which is GR001, relates to a practice that we've done for several years, because it is qualifying funding the transport levy to use the Clean Air Zone, and this is extending that slightly for an extra $1 million. So that's what that proposal is. As Councillor Plowden said at the start, we are in ongoing discussions about a potential increase to the transport levy for next financial year. That isn't in these papers. We're in discussions with the finance team and with the chair of strategy and resources about that as well, as you would imagine. So I would anticipate there may well be an increase that comes in as part of the budget, which we'd assume we'd utilise CAS for some of that, that provides an increase to the transport levy above the level that we've done previously. So I just wanted to emphasise that as well. So
can I just clarify then?
Yep.
That $1 million would be used to support the existing level of the levy. It's not a $1 million boost to the levy.
That's right.
Okay,
but we are in discussions about
it's $1 million that will go somewhere else and be used for something else.
It's
instead.
relief on the general fund, but then there's an additional conversation, and because we only got the bus grant notification last week, and we were told to plan for up to a 75% cut, which hasn't materialised. We're still concluding the conversations with WECA, but they're perfectly aware that all three constituent authorities need then to be able to put that into their budget paperwork.
Thanks, Chair. I have one more question, but I'll leave it until in case anybody else is.
Thank you. That's very generous of you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. First, with my Harbour Committee Chair hat on, I'm going to acknowledge that a number of the capital lines that you have in your committee are also integral to the maintenance, not just of the highways, but also of the harbour infrastructure. So I'm just going to acknowledge that and thank you for that. The question I had was on the LED street streetlights energy pressure. So that's shown as a pressure of 207,000 next year. Can you unpack that a little bit? Is that just as a result of a delay in rolling out LED street lamps, or is there something else going on there that isn't getting identified in those 4 words?
I think that's just the price of electricity, isn't it? That the LED rollout is basically finished. I think it's more or less this month that we've finished everything, and it's been extended to things like parks and other places. So that's a really good news story. And I'm still talking about, I think it's £1.7 million saving per annum to our electricity bill thanks to the LED, but this obviously is reversed out by the fact that electricity has gone up in price.
So it is exactly what, as I said, I just wanted to build on that a little bit. The managing director of Schreider, who run the LED system, was asked to come to Bristol and went and meet the chief exec and John to use Bristol as an exemplar across Europe on the LED programme and how successful it's been. So while there is a pressure there, it's unrelated to the actual LED programme, it's just energy prices. The LED programme has been super successful.
And carbon savings as well as financial savings.
Thank you, Ed. I should have stuck with my first thoughts in terms of explanation for that, but I think this speaks to what we discussed yesterday in terms of next year, when we're going through this process, just having a little bit more explanation in these pressures, just to clarify what they are rather than just the bare headings. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add that I know you'll be interested that at no cost to docks, the programme was extended to parks and docks as well. So docks has benefited from that scheme.
Thank you. Did I see a hand from Councillor Gemfrey there? All right. Well, Councillor Rippington, we're back to you then.
Well, fortunately, Councillor Brown asked my question.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee then? That was all on my list. Wow. I think that's the first time we finished so early. But Councillor Plowden and officers, thank you very much for clearly a very comprehensive and satisfactory presentation there. Thank you for attending today's committee. We'll do the customary musical chairs, and if Councillor Townsend is ready, a bit before time, I know, we can move on to children and young people. Christine? Right. 15 minutes ahead of time after starting 10 minutes late. Imagine that. So, take a moment to get set up and so on. So whenever you're ready, Councillor, if you want to just introduce yourself, your portfolio area, and briefly speak to your budget before we jump into member questions. Whenever you're ready. I appreciate we are ahead of time here.
reports back and then we'll see where we are. Okay, thank you. I'm chair of the Children and Young People's Committee, Councillor Townsend. I'm going to give you a bit of background to this area. So 22% of our city's population are under 18. This is higher than the national average. And we've seen that recently as those children are passing through our education system. We currently have 780 children in care or care leavers, so slightly up on this time last year. And the focus of the whole of the work, both children and young people and education, is to break the link between educational outcomes and background because of the inequity and inequality that is decades old in our city. There are strong headwinds, however, in this area. The deep inequality has been compounded, first with austerity and then in relation to COVID. And the year group really that we're kind of seeing now moving through into post-16, where we see higher numbers of NEETs than we did this time last year. But we're also seeing that impact of COVID on children in sort of primary school age. So depending on the age of the child, when we had those lockdowns, they were impacted in different ways. And that's being seen now as they pass through our education and children's services sort of systems, if you like. There are significant cost pressures for children in social care, and we still see profiteering from private residential children's homes. But we will go on to talk about how we're going to try we have managed and will continue to try to manage that. So the progress in the last year, the budget overall, the dedicated schools grant, which as you know is ring-fenced specifically for our education sector, is around £500 million this particular year. The overall budget from the general fund for children's services and some of those educational, the sort of statutory elements that the local authority must perform in relation to education is just over 150 million. And over the next 5 years, we've got capital of around 100 million. The progress since last year, we've put the transformation plan into action, and these are long-term ambitions because we're talking about children's lives, so by definition they kind of need to be. The priority remains to be educationally, it's around our SEND sort of systems internally, and we've moved on this year with the school organisation strategy, which looks at sort of what the demand will be in the coming years from early years right through to post-16 and up to 25 for those that have special educational needs. It's the first time that this city has had such a comprehensive place planning strategy. So part of the transformation programme within the children's social care. So it's about trying to work with children and families at the earliest possible opportunities when needs arise. And if you remember, we invested in this area and we've recruited 36 full-time additional equivalent members of staff within the children's social care teams. Some of those have gone into this specific transformation. Some have been moved over into other areas, but we saw internal promotion and we also saw external recruitment into those roles. So we want to reduce the numbers of children that are needing to come into care in the first place. And so that's about boosting support at a point where social workers may feel that actually this might be something that is on the horizon, and keeping children with families where it's safe to do so, or close to families wherever possible. If it's necessary for children to come into care, then we want their placements to be as stable and as long-term as they possibly can be. So there's been a boost in the support for those families and those placements to keep those children, to keep those as successful as possible. We've had some, there's what I think they call it something like market control, whereby you work with other local authorities so that where it is necessary to have to place a child somewhere that isn't either in isn't in foster care, or one of our own residential care homes is run by another provider. There is some kind of control over those prices. So that's sort of group work, I suppose, we would call it in education, whereby the local authorities in and around this area are working together to kind of have some influence over that market. And then the early help type work, which ultimately is the level at which we want to be working. So that's in the non-statutory area of our work, to support families, support children and their schools and their communities, so to prevent the escalation of need. There's figures on here. We might talk about the figures later. So educate, yeah, I mean, the educational, there has education. So overall attendance went up this year, as did the outcomes at the end of Key Stage 4, which is the GCSE levels. There's still much to do with our educational attainment. We're still seeing the gaps between children that are entitled to free school meals and those that aren't. And there is still the system itself, as education institutions, there's still some work to be done with those schools to try to move them, some of them, to a place where they are better able to support those children that have those additional needs. When we come to set the dedicated schools grant, there is a small part of that can be decided locally, and so, as in previous years, we will, as a local authority, keep the minimum funding rate where the regulation requires us to, and then that gives us a bit more of the funds that we can then target towards what they call additional educational needs, which is second language, prior attainment, which covers off the SEND, and then those entitled to free school meals. So, and that funding is related to those children that have been identified as having those needs. So, if the child is in a school, that school gets that money, and then if that child moves to another school, it moves with them the following year. So, looking ahead, we're going to be putting we put additional money into the educational psychology teams. 1.1 million, 0.8 million is for the permanent staff for a new disabled children's home. So that's the kind of bespoke facility for children that have been identified and we know about. We've got 0.1 million that need to go into increased salaries for our social workers as they go up through their pay spines. We will be putting additional funding into the independent travel training service, particularly for post-16, but also we would be looking to bring that down possibly into Key Stage 4 for those children that may be at a point where they can begin to learn some skills for independent travel. And the other area of pressure that we're seeing is in relation to our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who become care leavers, and that is related to the Home Office's ability to get through what is called nationally the backlog in refugee and asylum-seeking applications. When a child comes into our care, as a child in care, as an asylum seeker, we have care leaver duties for them once they become 18. So we remain responsible for that child until the Home Office has got to a point where they've made that decision. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor, for that introduction. I'll open up to questions from the committee now. Councillor Mack. Then.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask something about you've got a new income pressure, which is youth offending team pressure from funding cessation. I was just interested where the funding used to come from, why that's something we're now picking up. It was youth offending team. That looks like it used to be funded elsewhere, 189,000.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. So we the youth justice team is funded from a number of different sources, obviously for health, police and from the OPCC. And at the moment we're a bit unclear about OPCC contributions into the youth justice service. And so it's in the expectation that we will have a reduction in Office of Police Commissioners contributions into the service, and therefore we'll need to make up that gap.
But maybe we won't, but probably we will. Yeah, okay. And then I was just interested a little bit more of our unaccompanied asylum seeker accommodation, because I know the costs there are quite challenging, in terms of our working with the government and the support that we're getting there. So I guess, what are we doing to make sure that we have the appropriate accommodation and support, and what are the additional challenges there?
Well, I mean, their needs all children that come together, their needs are complex, but they're specific and they're complex, but they've also got some needs that are outside maybe of what would be a traditional sort of social worker. I mean, we prioritise those that are most vulnerable within our systems, and so I have asked the question as to, do the Home Office do the same, or is it they're on a list and you wait until you come to the top? Because it would make sense from my perspective for unaccompanied asylum seeking children to have a specific team within the Home Office that look at those kind of applications. I don't know. Hannah, do you know? I mean, that's just me giving my view, basically.
Yeah, and it's worth saying that obviously we're part of the National Transfer Scheme as much as any other city is. We don't receive any more or any fewer young people as claiming asylum because we are a city of sanctuary. We are part of the National Transfer Scheme, and therefore, I mean, at the moment we're slightly below our numbers in terms of National Transfer Scheme young people, but we do see a number of spontaneous arrivals into Bristol, particularly because we're a city, and we tend to support young people who arrive, obviously. We are looking, as you say, at commissioning housing for post-18 young people who are care leavers, who've arrived as unaccompanied and now obviously care leavers. We're looking at the recommissioning of housing for those young people whilst they have no recourse to public funds before they can enter the housing pathway. So that is an area of active work for us to reduce costs.
Thank you. If I could just issue another reminder about staying close to the microphones, please. And sorry, could I ask the officers if they'd like to introduce themselves for the benefit of the webcast, please? Thank you. If you just introduce yourself, just for anyone watching online.
Hannah Woodhouse, I'm the Director of Children's Services in Bristol. Thanks.
Hello, Ben Hegarty, I'm the Finance Business Partner for Children and Education.
Thank you. Councillor Logan, then.
Thank you. There's a tremendous amount of really good work happening in this area, and it's good to see that a continuity of planning from last year to this year in terms of a strategy. And I'm the councillor lucky enough to have the new youth zone being built in Fulwood, which will be open not only this time next year, but in about 6 months' time, which will be absolutely tremendous. And it's good to see national government catching up with Bristol with having a strategy for youth work. One thing I wanted to ask Christine that isn't in a lot of detail in the proposals is around our work on children's homes, because this time last year, one of the biggest things that we were doing to reduce to build better homes for children, outcomes for children, but also reduce the costs for external placements, was building more and better youth children's homes in Bristol. So I wanted to ask how that's gone in the last year. So I think we've done that, or I think we've done some of that. So how has that happened? Is it having the impact that you hoped and thought it would be? And therefore, should we do more of it?
Yeah, so mixed bag, I think we would say. So the procurement process, we didn't find a suitable partner the first time round, and so we needed to go again. But 3 homes are now up and running that weren't last year: Silbury, Maple, and Harmony. And then we have, in addition to that, we've put in the 2 new what we would call internal residential children's homes. So one specifically for a disabled child that has severe problems, severe issues that we know that they're going to need very specific accommodation for, and then a small home for what will be sort of older boys, teenagers with what we call social, emotional and mental health issues. So because we can see that from the analysis, that is an investment that is worth us putting into the system, because we feel that there will always be a demand for those sorts of internal housing. So yes, I mean, some of it's good, some of it's not so good. What has been particularly successful, though, is the Back to Bristol programme, which was part of the transformation programme, which I think it's 36 or something. Yeah, so it was something like, the target was something like 22 children, because they brought them back over the summer, and the target was something like 22, and actually we've got to 36. And so it came to the last CYP meeting, so the graph of the money that you would have spent but you don't now need to, because you've brought them back home and they're in suitable accommodation back home that's much cheaper than residential, is tracking well above where it was predicted to be at this time. But what I would say to that is that's really good and very successful. However, we will continue to move at the pace that the children require. So it might be that when we get to the end of the year, we're where we thought we would be, because actually we've done a lot of really good work, but actually things, for whatever reason, because I think we spoke about this last year, there are so many moving parts that need to be in place before it's the right time to bring children home. And so those between now and the end of the financial year, things can move and shift for that, and it might not be. We might plan to bring them back in February, but actually it may well be May or the end of the school year when, for that particular child, is the best time for them to come home.
Yeah, we absolutely should move at the speed of the child. Absolutely. No one wants to move a child just purely to please an accountant. But I guess the question is, you made the point about not spending the money that you would have spent, and it's not a pressure that's here because of something's happened. It's a fact that you're not commissioning that placement that you would have done. So, in terms of commissioning that ecosystem for sustaining placements in Bristol, should we be investing more of that in Bristol?
Well, I've just explained to you that we're commissioning 2 more: one for disabled children, one for older young male teenagers. That's what the assessments up to this time, this moment has told us. There will always be the need for children to be outside of Bristol, some for longer periods of time than others. Some of those children might be in special guardianship or care orders, or they might be in kinship care, and those families might not live in Bristol. And so therefore it will be necessary for them to be outside of the city, because that's the best place for them. So we're never going to be in a situation where we don't have children that are placed outside of the city. However, the numbers that were being placed outside of the city over the last couple of years just kind of ballooned, really, and that was what was taking the budget over what over that we were kind of we were setting at the beginning of the year. So it's better managed now because there's better planning within that, and we're getting to the point where we're beginning to be able to see which children are coming through our care system and what are they going to need into the future. So the disabled children's home, for example, in the past they may well have gone out somewhere else. They might look to external home somewhere else, but actually if we put the capital in ourselves, that's a better experience for those children and for their families, and it's a resource that Bristol has, and we can continue then to use those.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just going to add that beyond the homes that Christine's talked about, we have another 9 planned, allocating another 20 additional places due to open by October 2026. So we have significantly expanded our children's homes, as Christine said, sometimes children will always need to go outside of Bristol. And there's always a balance, isn't there, as the councillor says, in terms of balancing internal and external placements. But we've quite significantly expanded our programme, and as you know, that's quite a complicated project. But we do hope that there will be, I mean, we've got some significant savings in the budget against that.
Okay. So those are schemes that are opening between over the next year, effectively. Well, that's fantastic. That's exactly what we should be hearing. Shouldn't that be delivering a saving that we're seeing in here? Is it just too small to see within the context? But is it you'd expect to see an impact of that being evidenced? It's
something like it's not. I don't want to call it savings because it is. We're not cutting. It's money that you would have been needing to spend, but because you've made the changes within the system and within the context within which you're caring for the children, it's not necessary for you to spend that amount of money. So next year is something like 22 million that we would have otherwise needed to have spent in children's social care that we no longer will need to spend as a result of those pieces of work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think if I understood that all correctly, we're not cutting. The budget might shrink, but that's not because we're cutting it. It's because we're spending much more efficiently.
It's the invest to save elements that we were talking about this time last year that have gone in and are beginning to show I suppose they are savings, but it's coming within the budget that we were set in a much better way than it was this time last year. Yeah.
Councillor Max indicated she wants to come in on this point.
Yeah, I think, and it's part of what I just overheard there, but I think part of it is that, so if it is a saving, the base budget would look at the increased pressure, and then so it could be shown as a saving, but I think what I'm understanding is it was a saving last year. So it is it's continued saving, but we've already seen it and looked at it. So it's not listed again this year, I think.
It's not a pressure.
But that still would, the base budget would be, sorry, here's me trying to explain the budget. The base budget would include that demand pressure. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Jumfrey?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Firstly, so obviously we've had Ofsted in very recently, and I know the social work teams will have been working extremely hard around that, so thank you to them. I believe the result isn't public yet, but do we have any teasers that any news or whispers that we can share?
Not sure this is finance
I'm going to look to Hannah to see if we're allowed to say anything, because I'm not sure.
We haven't had anything formally. We've had some verbal feedback, but we haven't yet seen, or certainly Christine hasn't yet seen, a draft letter. So I think until we see, I mean, let's say that we had some positive feedback, but until we can see that draft letter, we hope to publish it shortly after Christmas.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Chair. I realise it's not specifically about finance, but it does impact on workforce retention and so on. My specifically finance question was about the DSG deficit and the safety valve, and whether you could just give us a bit of an update on how that's going.
So there's a couple of announcements that came out of the recent budget. So what we did learn is that when the override finishes, which I think is 28-29, the government at a national level anticipates that there will be something like 6.6 billion gap between what local authorities will receive in their high needs budget and what the demand will actually be. And it has since been clarified that 6.6 billion is going to come from will be found from other departments, not from inside the Department of Education, because there was a concern that 6.6 billion basically would be taken out of the schools block, out of the mainstream funding, and would then be expected to go across. That has been kind of settled, and that's a good thing. What we've not heard about are the accumulative deficits that local authorities will have in 28-29. That is considerable across the country, and there will be tens of local authorities that will be doing section 114 as a result if there isn't anything that changes between then and now. I mean, this is what I think now about the DFE. If the DFE was to announce today that they'd write it off, it would give some kind of, there is no incentive then for local authorities and education establishments to try to keep sort of maintain and keep a really good eye on what was going on with that deficit. And so I understand why they haven't necessarily highlighted that at the national level. At the Bristol level, we will still be in the safety valve contract in 28-29. So there's recently been the conversation that happens between the Bristol leaders and the Department of Education and their safety valve team, and they are very happy with the changes that Bristol have been making. Those happen 3 times a year. So they do look at the deficits, but what they're mainly looking at, because this is what will make the difference, is what are you doing within your city? Partly that might be additional school SEN places, which we know for many years that we've needed, or it might be inclusive practice in mainstream schools that enables more children with special educational needs to be to be educated in a mainstream school, which is by far cheaper. Have you got anything else to say about the safety valve? I don't know.
Only that obviously we're under a duty to be able to provide to children and young people when they're assessed as in need of support, and so we need to do that, which is where the pressure is coming from, and there are increasing needs and complexity of needs in this city, and there are nationally, as you know, and as Christine said, the 2 areas, inclusive practice by schools and building additional resource places, and we're doing both of those across the city as part of our SEND strategy, and we wait to hear more about the SEND reforms in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rippington?
Yeah, thank you. I think some of what I was going to ask has been kind of pulled out in what we've just been discussing, but overall we've got 4 million of pressures here, and we've got £500,000 of savings. So I'm assuming that's because a lot of the transformation programme savings are already baked into the budget, which is what we were kind of discussing. So the budget for this year already incorporated the way we're starting to save through the transformation programme, which is why we can only find another 500,000 of savings. But so to me, that suggests that our deficit for this year is 3.5 million, because we've got 4 million of extra pressures and 500,000 of savings. So is that what we would call our deficit on, above what we were expecting to spend this year? We're going to be spending an extra 3.5 million.
That's my, yes. That's my understanding, yes. So we set the budget at the beginning of the year, and as of today, on 31st of March, that's what the prediction is. And the breakdown of that, I don't think it's in here, but some of it is no recourse to public funds because we have a legal duty to those with families. Some of it is health contributions, and this was also around last year, although we're further forward this year with the health contributions when it comes to very, very high need children with EHCPs. And some of it is unaccompanied asylum seekers, which I spoke about in the introduction, that the duty is ours until the Home Office gets to the point where they've decided those cases.
So in terms of the safety valve, sorry.
I was only just going to say that you're right that we already have 12 million savings into this in next year's budget. So this is 500,000 on top of 12 million, which is already in the budget. So in a sense, we have to deliver that, and we will deliver that. What we didn't want to do was to add savings that were not deliverable.
So, yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking of the profile that we presented for the safety valve, this would mean that we're going above the profile that we were hoping to achieve for this year by by 3.5 million. Yeah.
Oh, the £3.5 million is the general fund. The DSG is the separate. What's the DSG at the moment? What are we anticipating with DFE and our contributions at the end of the year? 56 or something, isn't it?
I would need to check those figures, but yes, so this is specifically general fund pressures and savings.
This is general fund.
We're only talking general fund here. So what you're talking about, I think, is the high needs deficits, which is separate to all of these.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Brown?
Thanks. I think my question is a bit more prosaic in terms of it's about the line that's to do with the Children's Social Care Prevention Grant. And I appreciate my complaint earlier about lack of explanation in line. There is an explanation of this, but I'm still not quite sure I completely get my head around it. So this is to do with our assumed inflationary increase that is required for the funding of this service each year, but it does suggest that core funding will be allocated to offset that. So it is just acknowledging a pressure, but also acknowledging that there is a mechanism for funding that.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, what note is it?
It is on page 23, and it's the fourth line down.
Fourth line down, new burden, Children's Social Care Prevention Grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a grant that we're not expecting to receive. I think it's been ended at national level. Is that correct?
Well, it's. I mean, I think that's the inflationary increase in the grant that we're planning, and we don't know yet. I think it's one of the sort of planned. Sorry, it's one of the planned announcements to be made before Christmas. Is how much of that grant we're going to get. The Children's Prevention Grant is a grant that comes centrally into the budget. We can have a debate about the ring fencing of it, but in essence, it's passed into the service in order to be able to fund social care services across, and particularly the national reforms. So we do receive the full amount of the grant. I think what's in here is the inflationary uplift built in against that grant. That's my understanding.
Okay, is that when it says in core funding, is that part of the core settlement? Because this seems to be, so there was other items elsewhere in other directorates where the former grant, homelessness prevention grant, for example, was being rolled into the core settlement, but that was treated differently because that showed the whole of the grant going in, whereas this is just showing an inflationary increase, and that's what prompted my question, because it seems to be a similar thing but a different treatment.
Yeah, this is the grant where costs increase year on year, so it's just keeping pace with the cost increase. So it is mainstreaming the grant in the same way that the public health grants that are kind of more fixed grants, they're being mainstreamed. So previously the budget in children's social care would have assumed income coming in direct from the grant. We're now putting this forward, so it's to take that income expectation out year on year, because it would just be core funding that comes into the bottom line of the council.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
I shall take it away and mull it over because I'm not an accountant, unlike some of the committee, so maybe I just need to think about it a bit more.
So, Councillor Repington, did you have anything to add on that one? Okay, Councillor Hugger.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a comment and a question. I just wanted to say that I appreciate that there's a lot of good work going on in this area, a lot of innovative work. It's obviously, a hugely complex area, but I do appreciate the work that's going on to try to control expenditure, which otherwise, could very easily get out of control. My question relates to the no recourse to public funds, so it's volume increases, and you've, I think, explained that in your presentation. But in 27-28, that seems to unwind. So I wonder if that's based on an assumption that there will be funding coming in from central government to cover that, or is that for another reason?
My understanding is that this is something to do with a timeline between Brexit and the amount of time those people with European Union passports can apply to become citizens, and there's a cut-off point. That's my understanding. However, that's not to say that there still won't be people with no recourse to public funds that are in our city that are destitute after that period of time. But this is an expectation based on what's previously happened with this particular group of European citizens that in the past would have been able to access benefits because we were part of the European Union, and we no longer are. So therefore, this is the category within which they fall. But I can't explain the ins and outs of Brexit and the timeline and what that intricacies are. I just know that there's a timeline that comes to an end, and that's what's referenced here.
Yeah, and what you can see is basically an assumption that we will be able to manage that demand in the second year. So what we're seeing is quite significant. You look in our pressures position at the moment, we're seeing quite significant pressure there because we have got families presenting with destitute with support for children, and what we're wanting to do is review. It's obviously, we want to support children and families where we're legally obliged to do so, and we want to make sure we can do that sustainably. So we're recognising the pressure, and we're assuming we'll be able to control that pressure, which is why we're taking it out in the following year.
Thanks for that. That does help to explain it. Thanks very much.
I mean, there was a time when we were spending. This was costing us about £4 million a year. So there has been some quite specific training and legal understanding around the team that are dealing with those kind of at the front door kind of families and children that show up, and they're kind of so that there has been quite a lot of intensive work that has managed to ensure that we meet our legal obligations.
Thank you. I will say I'm not sure anyone can explain the ins and outs of Brexit at the moment, Councillor, least of all maybe the Brexiteers. I was wondering if we'd tick that particular bingo box off this meeting. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, as I've done with a number of previous policy chairs, I've kind of commented on performance against budget that we set last year. I'm just kind of noticing how much better the kind of sticking to budget this year has been than last year. So last year in October, we were kind of nearly 20% over budget, and that's the revised budget that Andy explained to me during the break. And this year it's kind of like down to 6%. So, I mean, I think that's a kind of a big achievement, and is kind of like showing the kind of the focus that's there. But also just to kind of bear in mind that the budget we set for 23-24 was under 100 million for the general fund and children's young people, and it's going to be 60% higher next year. So, it's massive year-on-year increase. And I just kind of wonder at what stage you think that scale of increase is actually going to slow down.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been looking really, really hard at this, and it is, as Christine said, across the country there's a number of big inflationary pressures, not least the cost of private providers and residential homes and inflation, and needing to very, very little market room for manoeuvre when you're faced with providers like that. We have looked at other core cities and the amount of inflationary costs that they've seen over the last 5 years. We were at the beginning, sort of 5 years ago, we were one of the lowest funded children's services departments in the country, and we are now, as you say, we have seen significant increases, for which, obviously, we were pleased to see. The budget that is being presented here, and I hope where we may end up, will eventually see our budget level off, as you can see. But we want to make sure that we're doing that in a sustainable way, so that we don't level it off so quickly that we end up with overspends. And I think that's the piece of work that we've been doing throughout the year. So yeah, you can see year on year 23-24% inflation's going over the last 3 years. Our next year at the moment we're looking at around about 10 to 13%, but it, we need to see where we end up, which does represent a reduction, and then we've got some really significant savings against that. So what we're trying to do is to recognise realistic growth, and through the transformation work that we've done, reduce our budget over time.
And the other thing that it's practice at an earlier stage of need that will make the difference, which is why, because this time last year it was very much we were operating in the statutory level, and that was where the costs were. With the investment, we've been able to start working earlier with families, earlier with children, and then the need is less likely to escalate to the point where that really costly intervention is needed. And the same is true in the education system. So there has been a shift under the Labour government towards inclusion in the mainstream, and you trying to meet needs early years primary, so that you're not working in the most expensive kind of statutory area, but children's needs are being met much earlier, and more of the staff are able to work with those children and the needs that they might present.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions from members of the committee on this? I'm not seeing any hands. So thank you very much, Councillor Townsend and officers, for attending today and answering questions. Last but by no means least, I think we are all aware of how important your portfolio is for the future of all our young people in the city. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So we will now turn to the report recommendations for this meeting, which are that the Subcommittee for Finance, 1, notes the process undertaken to date by the Finance Subcommittee in its role to support budget development. 2, notes and reviews the draft pressures, savings and capital development for the General Fund. 3, notes and reviews the draft developing position for the dedicated schools grant. 4, notes and reviews the draft pressures, savings and capital development for the housing revenue account. 5, undertakes to deliver a report update to the meeting of Strategy and Resources Committee on 2nd of February 2026 to outline the methodology and engagement of the Finance Subcommittee throughout the budget development and review of savings undertaken, including any observations on savings development to Strategy and Resources. In the course of our deliberations, we have complied with recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4. Recommendation 5 asks us to deliver a report to the 2nd of February meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee. In terms of next steps, our comments have all been noted and will be summarised in a draft report as well as in the minutes of this meeting. By early January, we will know more about the provisional financial settlement from the government, and we will be briefed on analysis of the budget consultation. I do suggest it might be appropriate for myself and the Vice Chair of the committee to review the report before we share it with all members of the subcommittee for feedback and comments, so that then we will submit a final version to the Strategy and Resources meeting on 2nd of February next year. Is this all agreeable to members of the Finance Subcommittee? I'm seeing nods. Wonderful. Then I will take those recommendations 1 to 4 as noted and our actions for point 5 agreed. Thank you all very much. This does conclude the Finance Subcommittee meeting over the 10th and 11th of December 2025. Thank you all very much to members for attending. Thank you to officers for facilitating, and to anyone who may be watching online at this point for coming. Thank you very much. We can all go home half an hour early. It was in the diary until 7. It was moved to just until 6.
I thought